Underground. Hi, everybody. This is Lynette with Underground Science. Today, we have got a topic for you that is a little bit different than what my shows normally are, but it is also has to do with something that's a lot more dear to my heart. I have got my friend Elizabeth Wainwright here and my other friend Melanie Coy. We have all worked together in the past with animal welfare, and there seems to be an issue that is going on with, and we're not blaming any one particular police officer. We're not blaming as a whole, but we have issues with police officers going into homes, running into dogs they see out in the street, and such as there's one called Chance. He was actually shot by a police, I believe it was the chief of police in Sparta, Missouri, because he didn't have time to drop the dog off at the kennel before he went to another call. Uh, we have the officers going to homes, and I think a lot of this is due to not being educated. Would y'all agree with that?
Absolutely.
I think a fair piece of it has to do with education. I also think some of it has to do with the lack of resources to them to handle animal situations. I mean, the reality is for a police officer, they're far more concerned about human life.
Right.
So in a situation where there's a choice between human life and animal life, they're always going to choose human life. In the situation in Sparta, I was not a part of it. I'm not that familiar with it. But my understanding is that it had a lot to do with him not understanding what was available and what he was legally required to do. Melanie?
I absolutely agree with you. In this case, a lot of the animal control officers are thrown into that position with no dog background whatsoever. And then you add into it the fact that I don't know a police department that is not underfunded, understaffed. You're being pulled from one direction to the next with little to no notice. It's a high-stress situation, and then throw somebody in that is also not experienced with handling dogs, and you've got a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely.
I think you do. And I mean, a lot of towns do have animal control. What I don't think we're seeing is animal control pulled in as much as they need to be. And from what I've read, there's other animal control officers that have said that. And I don't know about other areas, but I think sometimes you could work with your rescue organizations. To me, if the police officers are going in on a raid and they have been watching this house for a while, they're going to basically know if these people have dogs in the house. So that way they would know to go for assistance. I mean, you might have like a little dog like Scraps who, he walks outside, lifts his leg, and he's like, I'm done. I'm not doing anything else. And then he's back sitting on the couch next to me. But to me, if they've put time into watching, say, a drug house, they're going to know if those people have pets. I mean, and I may be wrong, but that's my opinion there.
Well, and so many times you've got such a preconceived notion of what the pets are going to be.
Right.
But it's not even a breed or a size issue. We just not many years ago had a problem in a county neighboring where I live where a sheriff's deputy shot a Chihuahua. And how threatened could she have felt? Or what possessed her to think that that kind of extreme reaction was appropriate on any dog, but especially one that's small?
Right. I think Elizabeth has gotten a bite or two from those.
Well, 15 years in animal welfare, what can I say? So I think you're dealing with an issue that has a lot of different areas that we have to think about. So you have a police officer training situation, just a simple peace officer training. You have either the availability of animal control resources as well as the issue with the training of animal control resources. You have very minimal in most states. I'm not absolutely certain who's required to license and take some training now or not in terms of both different positions. But then you also have the potential issues of liability faced by cities that doesn't seem to be something most cities are aware of. for me personally, as you know, and I don't know if your audience knows or not, I've worked in animal welfare at a state level and a local level and a county level in different cities throughout the Midwest for the past 15 years. Depending on the capacity, depending on the department, depending on the resources, depending on how willing they are to listen, makes the big determination about how an animal case goes. I have been an animal control officer in a municipality housed in a police department that still wasn't notified when they were executing a warrant and ended up shooting a dog on a property. They had resources available, they chose not to utilize them. Why? To this day, I don't really understand. But it's just the way the mob flops. The question is, how can we, as both citizens and as animal welfare professionals, figure out a way to work with law enforcement officers to make these situations better for animals, better for the law enforcement officers, as well as help those cities prevent themselves from being liable for a situation that was completely avoidable.
And that's the thing. And I think most of the situations, it's avoidable. I can understand, maybe, I don't know, somebody goes into a house and there are people that will stick their dogs on cops. I've seen that on TV before. And I think then the officer does have a right to protect himself, of course, and the owner is responsible on that. But, I mean, you had the case, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was a Chihuahua in a dog crate, and they just shot it. I have no idea what would have possessed them to do that.
Well, there's been a lot of those types of circumstances, and I think it's great that there's more public awareness about those now. I'd like to say that they're isolated, but I haven't done the research to say that it is, and I sadly don't think that it is.
No.
What I've seen quite a bit is police officers have a reactivity. They see a dog and they automatically shoot. And they have a variety of reasons. The most common is, it was coming after me and it was going to bite me. But that's the same as having been an animal control officer. I can tell you that every stray dog call you get is a pit bull running in the middle of the street. Right. It can be a 3-pound Chihuahua, but the call will always be that it's a pit bull on the loose. Mm-hmm. So I don't think police have had any training, and I understand that there's a limitation in what they have the time to teach in a police academy. I know in Missouri it's post-certification. In Oklahoma, where I live now, we have CLEAT certification. There's a limitation on how much time is available to teach about animal welfare issues. And there's certainly not been a big push in the continuing education part of certification to require police officers, or at least give them an opportunity to take a body language class or a breed identification class or anything covering the basics of animal laws. We have a little bit here because we are such a heavy agricultural state, talking about livestock laws and the regulations that have to do with shooting a dog that's chasing livestock, or what you do with a stray cow out in the middle of the road, or those sorts of things. But you don't see anything really in the states I'm familiar with, and I'm sure there are in other states, that really gets into the meat of the issue and gives a police officer an opportunity to educate themselves.
Well, in southeast Missouri, too, we have an attitude of, well, it's just a dog.
Exactly.
And especially the funding, and you know what I'm going to say, a lot of our animal control officers down here, they fall into the job because nobody else wants to do it, or they made somebody mad. These are not necessarily law enforcement with any sort of training to begin with. Then you throw them into a position where they have absolutely no experience and no comprehension of animal behavior in any way. It's just, I think we keep going back to the education. In Missouri, as Elizabeth knows and Lynette both, we do have state laws governing chasing livestock. For the most part, even those enforcing our laws are not aware of the animal ordinances or laws that they are charged with enforcing. And that's a big thing. They don't know how far. Just like the officer in Sparta, and Elizabeth can attest to this, the only time field euthanasia with a gun is acceptable is extreme medical need or bodily injury in the case of livestock. This man had no idea he was breaking the law. It was just a dog. So
Right.
he did what he did.
And I've encountered that a lot. Anybody who knows me knows very clearly where I sit on animal welfare. I'm a dog person. I've always been a dog person, and I will always be a dog person. In two separate police departments I've worked in both cases, I've had road officers say, but it's just a dog. You know
Yes,
what? This is why you have a professional animal control officer. That's why you pick up the phone and you let me deal with the just a dog. That's not your job. You deal with the just a peoples, and I will deal with the just a dogs. But it's still tough for them to accept and be willing to let that role play out. And I don't know if it's because of kind of the machismo that goes with being a police officer. They think they can handle everything and they don't need no stinking little dog catcher to come save them from the dog, or what it is.
right.
Personally, I find it insulting, and there's
Oh
nothing
yeah.
that affects me more than someone within my own department, within my own ranks, telling me it's just a dog. Well, come on.
Yeah, I mean, to us and several other people, the just a dog. I mean, that's our kid. I mean, that's, Scrappers is my best behaved child out of all of them. My kids used to tell me, well, Walker's your favorite kid. We know Walker's your favorite kid. And for those who don't know, Walker was my Vizsla, uh, who's no longer with me. But, I mean, and for like the elderly, for anybody, kids, adults, it doesn't matter. The dogs are your companions or your friends or who you tell secrets to. They're who you cry to. And I think Katrina should have taught more of a lesson to everybody as a whole on some of that, because they were making people leave the dogs, uh, pets in general. And I think lessons were learned by like the Red Cross and doing evacuations and so forth for emergencies, that, these pets are very important to people, but that hasn't gone on to like a police department or, I mean, just some areas.
I think one of the most difficult things to get across to emergency management officials, fire officials, law enforcement officials, is that animal situations tend to be highly emotional situations. If there's something going wrong with the dog, even if it's happening while your house is burning down, let's say, people know that they're losing their home, but they're more concerned in some ways about where their dogs are. And if
Exactly.
you can give them that little bit of peace of mind of knowing that their pets are safe and their pets are tended to, then everything goes much easier in dealing with the people. And that's a lesson that people just have to learn, and I think they learn it by personally handling those situations. I've been in situations with house fires where I've had fire chiefs literally throwing dogs out to me because they knew I was there. I told them there were dogs in the property, and they got the dogs to me. So that gave the owners the ability to sit back, calm down, and handle what was going on with the house and not worry about the pets. I've had situations with very angry people in the middle of an arrest. I get called out to take the dog into custody, and as soon as they understand that I've got the dog is safe, no one's going to kill
Right.
the dog, suddenly that situation de-escalates very nicely. But I don't know how you get law enforcement officers to have that experience without personally going through it.
Well, and I wonder, I mean, I think one part, you got police officers who are probably scared of dogs.
Uh,
You've got
Really
the
do.
ones who are not unable to read body language, and to them, maybe getting bit or snipped at is going to be totally embarrassing. God forbid that happens. So, let's take down the dog before any chance of that. I think it was in Perth that we saw the video. The officer shot the dog, and what that dog was actually doing, his body language was, yeah, I know I'm kind of in trouble. The way he was curving a little bit, kind of presenting his rear end and, his head. He was curving. That's an apology, like, oh, I know I got out of the yard, or, I seen Walker do that all the time. He'd do something he wasn't supposed to, and he'd kind of waggle and, bend up a little bit and come towards it. That dog was not attacking. That dog's like, I know I'm not supposed to be out of my yard, and he just shoots it.
well,
Well,
and
Melanie
with
could probably speak to this a lot better than me, but understanding, think about how a police officer approaches a situation. They tend to kind of bow up and get ready to face it. And when you do that with a dog, you get the opposite reaction of what you get with a human a lot of times. And I'm sorry, Melly, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's okay, because that's exactly right. What they're doing is coming up and they're facing off to that dog. You can't humanize dog behavior, and that's what so many people make a mistake of. To a dog, you have to look at it from the dog's perspective. And let's face it, even the average owner, I see it in dog classes all the time, even the average owner humanizes the behavior. They don't understand that this may make sense and may be all right from your perspective, but from the dog's perspective, you're sending out a very different signal. In my case, because of my breed of choice, I'm seeing a lot of unnecessary, for me, it's gotten to the point of being sanctioned murder in the streets, because you're going to find the attitude of the only good pit bull is a dead pit bull.
And I've heard that, and that kills me when I hear that.
Yes.
You know, interestingly, here in where I live is extremely rural southern Oklahoma. We are geographically the smallest county. We are also population-wise the lowest density in the entire state of Oklahoma. And I don't hear that attitude down here. I don't really hear that attitude in Oklahoma, which is interesting. And it was very different coming here from Missouri, where I've heard it over and over and over again. But what you also tend to see here is a lot of people down in my part of the world, whether you agree with it or not, have pit bulls that they use for hog hunting. So they take good care of them, and they have much closer relationships with those dogs than your average stereotypical urban setting.
Right.
There also seem to be some interesting relationships with, just in general, people here tend to be fairly athletic and outdoorsy. They're kind of out, they're about, they're doing stuff, they're at the beach. And yes, we do have beaches in Oklahoma, but they're out and they're about and they're doing stuff. And so those terriers have that terrier drive, and they go with them, and they love that. Personally, as you two know, and the rest of the world probably doesn't, my baby is a 75-pound pit bull that came out of a meth lab in southern Missouri. I've had her since she was a year and a half old. I like her better than I like people. And she goes everywhere with me. And she has since I've gotten her. But in Oklahoma, everywhere you go, anywhere close to my house, everybody knows my dog. When I go down to the beach and my dog's running loose, no one says anything, no one thinks anything of it. They're a little leery if they have little kids. But as an owner, I walk over, I introduce my dog, make sure they feel comfortable, let them get to know her, which you can easily see that she's just the biggest baby in the world. And then they're fine. Where I tend to see a lot more of the stereotypes is dealing with the little dogs. You know, your Chihuahuas, your Pomeranians, your things like that. And it's not that they're more inclined to shoot at them. It's just that those are the dogs that are more perceived to be vicious. Now to be fair, 15 years, the only dog that have bitten by is Chihuahuas.
Yes, and it is usually justifiable. As a trainer and somebody who's always worked with the big muscle breeds and the big Mastiff type dogs, the one that felled me was a miniature dachshund, and he put me in the hospital for 4 days.
And dachshunds are my favorite. They're German and stubborn, like me. So I get it. You know, for me, and this is what a lot of the officers I've worked with and I've trained to handle, at least deal with dogs a little bit, what I teach them is give me a pissed off pit bull any day of the week over a pissed off Cocker Spaniel or Chow.
Oh, hell yeah.
Or any of those, because that Chow is going to be in my face. I love you. You're my best friend. Wait, now I'm going to take your face off. You're going to see the same thing with Chows. With the Akitas, you're going to see them go up and hit you in those shoulders and knock you down. With those little tiny breeds, you don't get any warning. They've never been trained. They've never been taught that they aren't supposed to bite. And they turn around, they nail you. A pissed off pit bull is going to give me a 40-second warning to get out of the zone. You're going to hear that growl. You're going to see that body. It's going to give me enough time to get myself to safety if I know what I'm looking at.
Absolutely.
Once they understand that, they're usually a lot more comfortable.
Well, and it's funny because I started with the pit bulls in Oklahoma, and I do know exactly what you're saying. I was just north in the lake country of where you are right now. I come to Missouri, and it's a whole new ball game out here. But then I look around what's going on around the country, and this this phenomenon of, I'm going to shoot it because you're not going to do anything to me, and it's going to be dead, and that's all I really want is another dead pit bull. I think it was Phoenix that actually tried to prosecute one of their officers for very flagrant violation, just shot the dog with, the dog was obviously not attacking, was not even giving any kind of aggressive body language. He shot it because he got the chance. Nothing ever came of it. And I think a lot of this, because there is no penalty for just
Right.
killing a dog. We've had instances, I believe it was in New York State, the pregnant woman was actually holding the dog, and the officer shot him, and it wasn't even the right house that they were serving the warrant. And she was holding the dog. Her family and her children are standing around her, and he got the chance and he took it. So
That amazes me.
And I've wondered if part of the problem is that there's not a lot of lawyers who are familiar with dog law, and particularly with the value of a dog and the federal violations that come with shooting a dog for no reason. I always mix this up, and I was trying to Google it really quick, but I didn't get a chance to finish it. It's either a 1983 or a 1984 suit that has to do with an owner being deprived of their property without due process, which, in our Constitution, we as Americans cannot be deprived of our property without due process. When a police officer walks in and shoots an animal, there's at least reason to investigate that circumstance to make sure that that shooting was justified. If that shooting was not justified, then it's quite possible that that owner was denied their property without due process. If that has occurred, that city faces federal liability for that circumstance. And there have been plenty of people who have sued successfully, but unfortunately, when you get into little towns, nobody has the money. No lawyer's going to take the case because they don't have the time and the money, and they don't understand how to pursue it in federal court. So
exactly.
you have to wonder, if we had more owners, more people willing to speak out and consider filing these lawsuits, if you would start seeing a shift within the cities to both make animal control a more professional job, and understanding that it's not the job to give to the guy who couldn't hack it on the garbage truck.
Right.
Right.
No offense, it's okay for garbage duty, but if you had more people willing to think about that, maybe when it starts costing the cities money, they start listening. And there have been lawsuits out there, but most of them have been against very large municipalities. It hasn't been, town of Sikeston, Missouri, population 15,000 or whatever it is.
Right.
It's been big, giant, million-dollar budgets. So maybe that needs to be some of the shift too, is we need more lawyers who are willing to get involved and understand the rights of owners and pursue those rights for those owners.
And you're absolutely correct, because under the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, that's what covers due process. And the fact that, number one, most people are not going to challenge law enforcement because they don't understand that they also don't know the laws governing animals. There's a certain fear, especially in the small areas, because for one thing, they're already in your neighborhood. You're already in their radar because you're
Right.
a pit bull owner, and that there's a stigma that's carried with that. But so many people have a fear of standing up and taking a position and speaking out. This is not right. And unfortunately, in these cases, the dog is going to stay dead. And people do. Money, legally, they back off.
Yeah, and I'd be really interested to look at a more comprehensive study that looks at the dogs that have been shot by police, regardless of whether it was ruled justified or not. And I think what you would find is that a large number of those, if not the majority of those, are occurring in areas that are low-income areas. I doubt you're going to see it in your upper-class areas. I doubt you're going to see it in your upper-middle-class areas, both because of the basics of you don't discharge guns in those neighborhoods, as well as the understanding that these people have a little higher class to them. So I think what you'd find is that a large number of the owners who've gone through this circumstance are owners that have plenty of previous contact with law enforcement, not in a positive way. So they are, as Melanie said, very hesitant to do anything to go up against the police because they fear retaliation. And they don't know or understand, they don't have those access to those resources that we have to understand that they have rights. And those rights have to be protected. Just because they happen to be broke as a joke doesn't make them less of an American and less covered by our Constitution.
Correct.
That is on the money right there, and you've said it. And you're correct. Nobody's going to come to my front door and threaten me. Number one, they know from experience that I do know the laws, and in most cases better, because like you, I was also certified animal control out of Arkansas. Mm-hmm. I know the laws of Missouri because they affect me directly every day because of the breed of choice. But they're not going to come and bang on my door. They're not going to find my neighbor's dog. We're all these nice little old ladies. Yeah, we've got pit bulls. But they're not going to come in and they're not going to blast our dogs in the streets. They're going to come in and they're going to, in her case, they're going to put them back in the backyard. But the fear of stepping forward, the fear of not saying, hey, we've got a problem. We have got to educate our people. We do have an animal control officer just south of us that is also a rescuer, very, very dedicated rescuer. She's making a difference. When she first took the job, I all but begged, demand that they send you to animal control, to the Missouri Animal Control.
The MACAs.
The MACA, exactly. And you and I have talked about this how many times, that to me, anybody, I don't care if you're a shelter worker, if you're a rescue worker, or what you're doing, if you're involved with dogs, animal control classes are going to be beneficial. It's going to help and I don't care who you are. If you're going to deal with dogs, you should be required. And I think we're seeing a change from around the country. More and more police officers are requiring their officers, or police departments are requiring their officers to attend classes, to be able to read just basics. You don't have to be a certified behaviorist. You don't have to be a trainer. But for your best interest, for the interest of your citizenry and their pets, you have got to have just the basic information to be able to do your job effectively. And that's a big thing. Know what you're doing. Go out there into the field and know what you're doing.
Well, and I think that brings up a couple of interesting points. You know, the state of Texas, which is literally 5 minutes from my house, has made an effort, and they require under state law that you go through training that is sponsored by the State Department of Health. And you have to be certified through the state in order to function as an animal control officer. I'm not as familiar with the training in Missouri since I moved away 7 years ago, but back then, the training that was provided by the State Level Animal Control Association was mostly provided by a nonprofit association that had their own sets of, how do I put this nicely, incentives. And it wasn't necessarily an interest in following the law exactly as the law says it is to be followed. And in Oklahoma, what we see, we have an animal control association that's not particularly active. They do sponsor a 2-week academy every year. They are teaching material that was last revised probably in the 30s and 40s as it relates to rabies control and some other parts of our state law. So you have to have concerns about training that's not sponsored by a state neutral department and whether or not they're even getting the best training possible. And one of the things that I've noticed is that I don't see our industry making a big effort to form some sort of national organization that provides basic standards of care. You know, when you get into manufacturing, there are agencies within manufacturing world that have nothing to do with the government that institutes quality standards, cleanliness standards, you know, these sorts of things. We as an industry absolutely have those needs, and yet I don't really see that out there. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because we're all such strong, stubborn women that we literally can't get along well enough to come up with these things, or what. But that's concerning to me. Another thing that can wait, and Melanie can speak to it much better than I can, is, are we as animal welfare agencies doing enough to reach into those communities to help them become better pet owners? You know, if your dog
That's
is well
something there.
trained, there's less chance it's going to run out in the middle of the road and that police officer is going to be afraid. But how do we, in our industry, how are we working to reach out into those communities to provide training resources and spay neuter and veterinary care and things like that? Are we doing enough?
Well, and I think, and as you probably know, I've never been accused of being shy. Part of why I live in a place where we don't have a double standard here, because they know that very likely I'm going to show up and I'm going to be very naggy about it. I'm going to be very nice to myself. But when we're out there, and they know we're out there, and they know that we are watching and that we're going to hold them to a standard. Now, I'm in a very small town. It does make a difference in your larger metropolises. But you've got little pockets of communities. That even St. Louis, how many different little pockets of communities that are actually only, what, 36,000 people? Get involved in your area.
I
But
believe it's 86 municipalities in St. Louis County.
exactly.
So you have 86 agencies, some of which do their own work, some of which contract it out to county. I mean, it's a mess.
Too many cooks in the kitchen is a lot of it. But like you said, now I see apathy. Well, somebody else is going to do it for me. It's not that we don't have the knowledgeable people. It's getting them off their duffs, because in a lot of cases, they have the knowledge. They have the ability to get out there and to make a difference. They're not going to do it. They don't have the gumption. I'm involved heavily in legislation. You would not believe what it's like to try to get somebody to just send an email to a legislator. We've
done that here in Oklahoma, and it's fascinating how vocal some people will be, but how unwilling they are to make those views public or use that ability to try and get something actually accomplished.
Armchair managers. Yes. It's very easy to sit on the other side of this screen and talk a good line, but when it really comes down to it, how many of them are going to be out there? And I can tell you it's probably lower than you would even want to guess, and it's sad. And especially in the breed that I've got, because we are so under fire from the public opinion squads. But to get them to understand that if you want to make a difference and you want to make a change, you're going to have to do something. I hear all the time, but I'm only one person, or it's not going to count if I do it.
One person can make a difference.
Exactly. I use the analogy, October, the color pink. Does this mean anything to anybody? This was one woman wanting to honor her sister, and look at what breast cancer awareness has become. Smoking is another big one. That was one woman in Kentucky wanting to get education into the schools, and look at what that's become. One person has the power, but somebody's got to do it. You can't just always throw it onto one person. In my case, obviously, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to defend my dogs because it affects me personally. And yes, because I'm doing something that's also going to be to your benefit, but where is the fairness in that? If you want to make a difference, it takes more than just one voice. Just think what we could do with two voices. Or in this case, look at us. There's three of us.
And then, Melanie, out of curiosity, have you found that, there's been a big effort to start repealing BSL throughout the country? Do you find that as BSL is repealed, that people become more accepting or more willing to at least learn about your breeds? Or do you find that they're still two pretty separate issues? Excuse me, I'm going to sneak off for a minute. I'll be right back, but I'm listening.
Okay. We have got
I gotta
so much
pee.
criticism. We have so much criticism coming from so many different directions. We've got the animal rights people who are saying that if we completely eradicate the breed, it's in their best interest. We have the haters who are pulling information from the media, not any legitimate, verifiable stats or proof or numbers. They're just, oh, well, I saw this in the paper. We have so many people coming at us, but I will say that of the horrors that Michael Vick was convicted of, that was probably when the tide began to turn. The public suddenly became aware of what these dogs are enduring at the hands of the human monster.
Mhm.
Uh, he might have started life as a thug, but this is a man who's worth millions.
Oh yeah.
It's not a socio-economical thing. Suddenly, okay, it's come out that somebody wealthy, look what they've done. And I think that helped us as much as anything, was the public finally start. And I hate to even say I appreciate that man's input, but that did seem to turn the tide. Unfortunately, we will have an uphill battle so long as the other pit fanciers will not get off their duffs.
Do you want to talk a little bit for the audience about the differences between the animal rights and the movement and animal welfare and how we consider things and look at things? Because I'm not sure people are real clear that, I love my dogs, but I'm no crazy PETA person now.
Oh yeah.
And that is a very valid point, because if you want to get my backup, call me an animal rights activist.
Yes.
And I am quick to correct people. In the case animal welfare people, we understand that it is our responsibility to provide food, shelter, care. For me, it's training, at least to the canine good citizen, just basic training should also be a requirement of a responsible owner. And we understand this. In my case, I will fight. Well, let's describe the animal rights people. To them, a dog has the same sovereign rights as a child, and they're pushing now for guardianship versus ownership. Um, we don't have the right to cage them. We don't have the right to milk them. We don't have the right to pull their eggs, which, if you want to check out the price of a dozen eggs in California, the land of the kingdom of animal rights, or the price of a gallon of milk, it's just amazing. In my case, I will fight the devil himself to ensure that I keep my dogs as my property. I am their owner, because it's the only protection they have under the 14th Amendment is my property cannot be seized without due process.
Mm-hmm.
The animal rights people would have it to where every animal it would be mandatory to spay neuter, which I agree there is a problem. Our shelters, and especially with the pit bull, the numbers are staggering. Black lab mixes still hold the #1 spot. Pit bulls come in second. Chihuahuas are #3.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, if the animal rights people got their way and we spay neutered everything tomorrow, in 7 to 10 years, where would you go to get a dog? And I'm not willing to give up my right to responsibly keep the dog of my choice. That responsibility entails that I've had pit bulls since 1979. For 36 years, I've had purebred dogs. I have only had 2 altered males in my entire life, because a lot of my dogs have been show dogs. My females, to a point, or after a point, I have spayed. I have never produced a half-breed. Part of my responsibility as a responsible owner is that my unaltered dogs do not run.
Mm-hmm.
Every state has running at large laws, state laws. Every I don't know a locale that doesn't have a local ordinance addressing dogs running at large. If these laws and ordinances are being consistently enforced and fairly enforced, how are we coming up with mixed breeds? But yet they scream, let's spay neuter everything, mandatory spay neuter. 2 years ago we tried to move for anti-BSL legislation. The Kansas City animal rights groups came out with, well, but we still want a mandatory spay neuter all pit bulls. The anti-breed legislation or breed-specific legislation is not about responsible animal ownership. It's about responsible animal ordinances. And that's where the difference is. We do need to address responsible owner laws like North Carolina, like a number of other states have done, but this is a separate issue. And I think this could probably be a whole nother show. So,
Well, and I come from kind of the opposite of you. I come from rescue. I have never owned an intact animal in my life, and I will never own an intact animal. However, every dog I have is a purebred dog that's come out of a shelter somewhere.
correct.
I don't have a problem with responsible breeders breeding responsibly to improve their breed. I have a gigantic problem with
Puppy mills.
And backyard
I'm never
breeders.
going to call them that. They're substandard breeding facilities, commercial breeding facilities. But I also have a big problem with irresponsible owners who just don't fix their pet and
Yes,
don't
correct.
and don't make sure that they're getting fixed. And I think, I've seen a lot of the mandatory spay-neuter laws, and that's lovely. But let's think about realistically who owns a large percentage of those dogs. They tend to be people of lower socioeconomic classes. So essentially, you're writing laws that are requiring them to spay neuter, which is a great idea, but if they don't have the money to get the dog fixed, which a lot of times is the case, they simply can't afford to go to the vet and get the dog fixed.
Mm-hmm.
How on earth do you expect them to pay any of the penalties? Why are you creating economic sanctions for a class of people who can't afford it in the first place? So in a city, and I'm not that familiar with Kansas City's, but I know when they were looking at it in a couple of other cities, they just wanted to pass across the board mandatory spay-neuter. You have to fix the dog or else you're going to pay this. And we saw the same thing throughout the country with differential licensing, which is, you pay a higher fee for your rabies tag on an intact animal than you do on a spayed or neutered animal. In both of those circumstances, you're costing them more money to own that dog, which means that you have more dogs that are going to run loose and that are going to go unclaimed because they can't afford to pay $500 to get the dog back.
Right.
You're going to see, as St. Louis County saw, fewer dogs get vaccinated for rabies because they can't afford a $100 tag for the dog. They could afford the $15 rabies shot, but they can't afford the $100 tag. So instead, they just don't get the dog vaccinated. Well, now we have a huge population risk of unvaccinated dogs running loose in a country where we still have active rabies in wildlife, and we see it occasionally in companion animals. But yet now you've created a whole class of dogs that are in contact with humans that they can't afford to vaccinate for rabies. This isn't very good thinking. But I think that on our side, we have to do a better job about thinking about our laws and thinking about the impacts of those laws. And if we don't do a better job, you can't expect anybody else to do it.
Exactly. Leading by example.
Yes.
And that's a point that just seems to go right over people's heads. And I don't understand that. I'm willing to stand by and live what I preach. I'm not expecting anybody to do anything that I myself wouldn't do. But it seems that people think it's rocket science. And it's not. It's basic common sense.
It absolutely is, and I think we don't see common sense enough. And it's at all levels. Going back to the topic we're here for, when you see these circumstances where animals have been shot by police, anybody who's worked on our side of the fence, generally we take a 30-second look at that situation and we know it was avoidable. We know exactly how we could have handled it to make it avoidable. A quick story. when Oklahoma had the Moore tornado, what was that, 2 years ago? The big giant F5 that tore through Moore. I was there helping as part of an animal response team. The night after the initial tornado, I was working in the response unit when a couple of federal dog handlers from one of the big, I don't remember which agency, but they handled drug dogs. They came in and they wanted a vet and they wanted tranquilizer rifles because there were two pit bulls in a house behind Plaza Towers Elementary, which was the elementary that was destroyed in the storm, that were so vicious that there was no way that anybody was going to get those dogs out without them being tranquilized. So here they come, they're loading up catch poles and tranquilizers and all sorts of stuff. I walked over to the canteen, I got me some beef jerky, and I walked on back and I said, let me go get them. I had my two slip bleeds and I had my beef jerky. And the dog handler said, there's no way you're getting those dogs out. You're going to get hurt. They're going to kill you, the whole 9 yards. And I said, okay. Well, I had a very trusted companion with me, and he said, just let her do her job. Let her go in and handle it. Give her 10 minutes. She's going to come out with those dogs on leashes. And the federal handler said, there's no way. Those dogs are going to eat that woman alive. Well, sure enough, I went in, me and my beef jerky, and next thing you know, here I came walking with two happy, waggy pit bulls on the end of leashes. And they couldn't believe that happened. But what I had to get them to understand was that they are federal drug handlers. They understand a dog that comes from a healthy background, that has never been abused, that hasn't been sitting in a trailer house in this circumstance, behind an elementary school where lives were lost, in the middle of a disaster zone, with heavy equipment running, and helicopters flying over, and sirens and booms as transformers are going off. They aren't used to dealing with those dogs. They're used to dealing with nice, happy, healthy dogs that want to go to work. And there's a big difference between those dogs. And once they saw that an animal control person could safely go in and get dogs like that, they suddenly had a whole new respect for my particular line of work. And it was really interesting to watch their reaction. I ended up getting hijacked by a couple of officers that were working in that area to catch up a bunch of dogs because they didn't know how to do it. But it was really interesting watching those federal handlers that, we know dogs. That's why we're in here clearing these dogs. We know how to handle dogs. No, you don't. You know how to handle healthy, happy dogs. I know how to handle crazy.
That's right. Yeah, dogs of unknown background. I had a similar incident with a southern sheriff's department. Dogs that got caught up in a meth bust. Dogs that sat there all night long, mom, dad, and 3 puppies. Stressed out, you can imagine. They were just incensed. And when I got to the site, number one, after I finished explaining the Fourth Amendment to the officer, I got permission from the owners in jail to be able to go onto the property and take the dogs. He had been standing outside the window tormenting this big male. Just absolutely. He didn't see where he was doing anything wrong, but this is also a man who didn't understand that the Fourth Amendment said that he couldn't do what he was doing anyway. Mm-hmm. But in this case, we're getting into a whole different level of ignorance of dog behavior. You see that this dog is stressing. You see that this dog is starting to go nuts. What does this tell you? Maybe you should back off.
Right.
The professional handlers, and I have the greatest, utmost respect for the pro handlers and for the canine workers, any of the working disciplines. But you are exactly right. They have it in their head. They've never had to deal with dogs of unknown backgrounds. And as we all three know, when you're dealing with a dog, this dog may look wonderful, but you don't know anything about this dog other than what you can see with your eyes, and you better be able to instincts. I tell people there's nothing really scientific about how I evaluate dogs or how I really go all out to save a dog, and a lot of it is gut instinct, and you've got to have that. But Elizabeth is dead on. Such limited experience.
The best way I've ever come around to explaining it to a police officer or anybody about how I can judge a dog is the same way that they trust their instincts to figure out which cars they need to search. When they pull
Right.
over a car for speeding, they have all those things that they've been taught and their instinct and their experience behind them, telling them what they need to look for and what might look a little bit off. I don't have that experience. I can't look at people and really give you much. I don't know. But I've been around dogs enough, and I've handled enough dogs that I know what I'm doing, I know what I'm looking at, and I know what I need to do to safely handle the dog in whatever situation it is. But that's the difference between professionals and somebody who isn't trained, doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't have the experience, and no effort has been made to get them that experience. So
Yes.
maybe what we really need to do, instead of blaming the law enforcement officers for situations that have happened, we need to sit back and we as a community need to come up with a way to make those educational opportunities happen, to make those resources available to them, even in these tiny little towns. Make those resources available so they aren't stuck making a bad choice in the first place.
And
Absolutely.
I think that's exactly what needs to be done. And along with maybe training your police officers, also let the public know. You want to work with the public and the officers and get everybody on the same page. That way, the people in the lower income, where something may happen, where it's like the dog gets shot, they realize they've got something to fall back on, that they can go to court on that. And if the public is more aware of this, you're going to have the police officers that are less likely to do something like that. And I think the better that they're trained and made aware of this, that you're going to get better results. The more they're going to want to call an animal control officer in, the more humane societies, rescues that are willing to work as a go-between and willing to work with your police officers, the more they're likely to call them in. I know from rescue, running a humane society, you get mogged down by a board of directors. Your board of directors makes a huge difference in a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I did go to various places, went out and did rescue, abandoned animals locked in houses. There was one house that they were, removing children from, I won't say where, and these people had probably 15 snakes, tarantula, lizards, rats, dogs. I mean, they had everything in the world. That's where I found out I really needed to learn snake handling.
No,
But
not happening. No. You call me for a snake, I'm going to tell you to shoot it.
Yeah. I'm with Elizabeth. I don't do snakes.
Nope.
it was an anaconda. It wasn't one like on TV. It was about that big.
The
And
only
it's,
thing that
oh,
is good
God.
for is, forgive me, snake people, but the only thing that is good for is a cute pair of boots. Nope.
And the one thing I know is I can run faster than they do.
Usually they can't outrun my shotgun, but whoop, nope.
Yep.
Nope. Fortunately, I have someone who is happy to handle those things for me, so I don't have to deal with them. Same thing with the spiders. You need to call somebody else because they are not animals; they are insects. And I know they technically qualify as animals, but they are not what you call the dog catcher for. No.
No.
Now, Lynette, on the other hand, I think in the time I've known you, I've seen you handle every kind of insane animal there is to handle. And bless you for that. I'm glad that people like you exist and that we can call you. Because
I had the zoo. I admit my kids were at home. My house was the zoo. Their friends used to bring their friends over because you'd walk in my house and there's barn owls, there's raccoons, and raccoons didn't get to stay. Me and about 4 policing type agencies got into it over those. I've had every animal. I've encouraged that, not to, load your house up with animals or to, become an animal hoarder, the crazy cat lady or whatever. But I was able to take all these animals out to schools, to daycares with elder kids, different things like that. So you can do education. But then, I had 2 boys that had a blast. I mean, they cannot say that there's too many pets that they were denied except the alligator that they wanted to keep out at the shelter and wanted to super glue a chain on the back of its head so that they could keep it out there as a pet.
Nope. Nope.
No.
Generally, I don't do cold-blooded. I don't like cold-blooded people, and I don't like cold-blooded animals. That's just basics for me. No.
No,
So I've handled
reptiles.
cat happily, and I've had the joy of handling down here in southern Oklahoma. I've had the joy of handling everything from your normal dogs and cats to stray buffalo,
That would be
cow.
cool.
No, buffalo are not nice animals. They're very unpleasant, and they're very large, and they're very fast, and I prefer to avoid them in general, and I will
They're good
continue.
to eat.
I, I, I'm kind of a beef, chicken kind of gal. That's pretty much where the line's drawn. But I've had the opportunity to handle a lot of wildlife down here and work with other agencies, and it's been very interesting, particularly on this topic, to interface with a lot of different agencies with a lot of different expertise and see how all of them kind of look at the issue a little differently and how all of their training level is a little different, and even within different districts you get different people and different knowledge levels and different levels of concern. And it's fascinating to see. It's really nice when someone wants to learn, and it's very irritating when you're confronted with well, it's just a fill in the blank.
Right.
One of the things I've run into, which I know is a little off topic, but still goes along with this, cattle egrets. The white birds that sit on the cows?
Yes.
There's 1,000 of them. They're everywhere. But that species, since it's a migratory bird, is federally protected, which means that as an animal control professional, if you get one of those birds, you have to take it to a licensed rehabilitator. You
Right.
can't just ignore an injured bird. You can't take it out and dispose of it. You have to deal with that bird. And it's been really interesting listening to different people in different agencies say, well, I mean, it's just a cattle egret. Or, oh my gosh, you've got to take that thing. Which for me was always a challenge because I literally live 5 miles from the Texas line. But I can't take it across state lines for treatment. I have to keep it within Oklahoma because of federal regulations. So it's real interesting at times dealing with that stuff. But, and it's fascinating to see how people react to that and how they react to the dog situation. Because what you find is that a lot of times they don't look at wildlife the same as they look at domesticated animals. And
Right.
depending on their background, they have more or less respect for wild animals over domesticated. So you get kind of interesting situations.
Well, I tell you what, I've got a countdown going on over here. Uh, and I would really like to do this again with y'all if y'all are interested.
Well, you know where I am.
Yep, know where you are, know where Melanie is.
That's right.
And I actually think it might be interesting to see if, between us and some other people we could wrangle into this, come up with some type of program that can be worked out in various areas. I know we have to go by the different state laws and so forth, but, to set up some programs, to work with people who are willing to go out there and do something, to work with the public and to work with the police officers and to work with the rescues, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw this out there and speak for Melanie, but if there's any law enforcement officers that need some training, that need a resource, that need some guidance, I am more than happy to provide you anything I can to help make your job easier, particularly when it comes to animals. So don't hesitate to contact me if I can be of use to you or of help to you in your department. Feel free. And I'm sure Melanie feels the same way.
She speaks for me. And how many years have we talked about doing this very same thing? If,
It's
So many.
been a while. So,
Yep.
well, it was great to see y'all. Elizabeth, I will be coming to visit.
Come
I
on.
know.
It's 80 degrees here. I don't know what you people in Missouri are doing, but it's nice and sunny in Oklahoma.
And I love that new accent you have.
Shh. I don't have an accent.
Oh, yes, you do.
I'm trying to fit in with the regulars.
I can hear that.
I
And
think
I've been
it's
back here how long? I still get, are you from Tulsa? It never goes away.
Yeah,
Well,
people don't really believe that I grew up in Canada anymore, but oh well. But
well,
if I'm
what is
tired, I tend to go with a northern accent. I'm just not tired yet.
well, what was so funny when I met Elizabeth, we were at a maca, and I mean, and she had just started getting, I guess, Southeast Missouri, and it was so funny because it was just like, she didn't know what to do around these type places, and then, she had ended up having a lot more fun around here than up St. Louis. The
When
St.
I went to
Louis
work,
left.
when I went to work for the Missouri Department of Agriculture, I worked under Dr. Jerry Eber, who was the program coordinator and the veterinarian in charge of the Animal Care Facility Act program, which regulates the commercial breeders and more or less anybody who enters animals into commerce. And one of the first things he said to me was, "You need to go get you a pair of cowboy boots." And I looked at him and I said, "Why on earth would I wear such a thing? I'm, you know, I wear like sneakers." And he said, "No, if you're going to work for me, you need to go get you a pair of boots." And I thought the man was insane. And then he sent me to work southwestern Oklahoma, or southeastern Missouri. Jeez, I got my states all mixed up. He sent me to southeastern Missouri, where Lynette, and I believe it was at the time chief of police over in Dexter, drug me out in I don't even know where, in the middle of something. And they made it pretty darn clear to me that no one was ever going to respect me if I didn't wear boots. That police chief, which I believe he passed away not too long ago, he always called me Boots, because after that, every time he saw me, I had a different pair of boots on, just to make his life fun. But yeah, you got to own boots in the country. And
Yeah,
I think in Oklahoma, that's the only way you keep from getting bit in the ankle by the copperheads.
Yes.
oh
Which is
yeah.
important. We don't have those up north.
Oh, no, no. No, I've got a pair of ropers for every occasion. I've got dress ropers. I've got.
Yeah, now pretty much I wear boots and I wear flip flops. That's about all you're going
That's
to
the
catch.
best shoes there are. All right,
Except
well, we're
I
going to
run a
have
spay neuter clinic and I wear sneakers when I work at my spay neuter clinic. But other than that, it's boots or flip flops.
All right. Well, like I said, maybe I'd really like for us to work on something that we can, continually do some more shows. Also, come up with more topics on these type things. We've got to get off here because the countdown. I'm getting over to the side. So,
Yeah,
but I really appreciate y'all being on here, and anybody who watches this, you can contact us. I mean, if one of us doesn't know the answer, usually Elizabeth and Melanie know everything. They remember everything. If I don't know the
we
answer,
don't,
I
we
will
know
look for it
somebody.
or ask them.
Yeah, if we don't know the answer, we know somebody who does, and we will find it for you.
That is a fact. That is a fact. Honored to be with you, ladies. You always make me proud.
All
I
right,
will
y'all have a
see
good
y'all.
evening.
You too. Thank
Bye.
y'all.
Bye.